Chapter 6 Jacob Part 13 of the Legends of the Jews Volume 1. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Legends of the Jews Volume 1 by Rabbi Louis Ginzberg. The War with the Ninevites. The destruction of Shechem by Simon and Levi terrified the heathen all around. If two sons of Jacob had succeeded in ruining a great city like Shechem, they argued, what would Jacob and all his sons accomplish acting together? Jacob meanwhile left Shechem, hindered by none, and with all his possessions he set out to betake himself to his father Isaac. But after an 8 days' march he encountered a powerful army, which had been dispatched from Nineveh to levy tribute upon the whole world and subjugate it. On coming in the vicinity of Shechem, this army heard to what the city had been exposed at the hands of the son of Jacob, and fury seized the men, and they resolved to make war upon Jacob. But Jacob said to his sons, "Fear not, God will be your helper, and he will fight for you against your enemies. Only you must put away from you the strange gods in your possession, and you must purify yourselves, and wash your garments clean." Girt with his sword, Jacob advanced against the enemy, and in the first onslaught he slew 12,000 of the weak in the army. Then Judah spake unto him, and said, "Father, thou art tired and exhausted, let me fight the enemy alone." And Jacob replied, saying, "Judah, my son, I know thy strength and thy bravery, that they are exceedingly great, so that none in the world is like unto thee therein." His countenance like a lion's, and inflamed with wrath, Judah attacked the army, and slew 12 myriads of tried and famous warriors. The battle raged hot in front and the rear, and Levi and his brothers hastened to his aid, and together they won a victory over the Ninevites. Judah alone slew 5,000 more soldiers, and Levi dealt blows right and left with such vigor that the men of the enemy's army fell like grain under the scythe of the reaper. Alarmed about their fate, the people of Nineveh said, "How long shall we fight with these devils? Let us return to our land, lest they exterminate us root and branch, without leaving a remnant." But their king desired to restrain them, and he said, "O ye heroes, ye men of might and valor, have you lost your senses that you ask to return to your land? Is this your bravery? After you have subdued many kingdoms and countries, ye are not able to hold out against 12 men? If the nations and the kings whom we have made tributary to ourselves hear of this, they will rise up against us as a man, and make a laughingstock of us, and do with us according to their desire. Take courage, ye men of the great city of Nineveh, that your honor and your name be exalted, and you become not a mockery in the mouth of your enemies." These words of their king inspired the warriors to continue the campaign. They sent messengers to all the lands to ask for help, and reinforced by their allies, the Ninevites assaulted Jacob a second time. He spoke to his sons, saying, "Take courage and be men, fight against your enemies." His 12 sons then took up their stand in 12 different places, leaving considerable intervals between one and another, and Jacob, a sword in his right hand and a bow in his left, advanced to the combat. It was a desperate encounter for him. He had to ward off the enemy to the right and to the left. Nevertheless he inflicted a severe blow, and when a band of 2,000 men beset him, he leapt up in the air and over them and vanished from their sight. 22 myriads he slew on this day, and when evening came he planned to flee under cover of darkness. But suddenly 90,000 men appeared, and he was compelled to continue the fight. He rushed at them with his sword, but it broke, and he had to defend himself by grinding huge rocks into lime powder, and this he threw at the enemy and blinded them so that they could see nothing. Luckily darkness was about to fall, and he could permit himself to take rest for the night. In the morning Judah said to Jacob, "Father, thou didst fight the whole of yesterday, and thou art weary and exhausted. Let me fight this day." When the warriors caught sight of Judah's lion face and his lion teeth, and heard his lion voice, they were greatly afraid. Judah hopped and jumped over the army like a flea, from one warrior to the next, raining blows down upon them incessantly, and by evening he had slain 80,096 men, armed with swords and bows. But fatigue overcame him, and Zebulun took up his station at his brother's left hand, and mowed down 80,000 of the enemy. Meantime Judah regained some of his strength, and rising up in wrath and fury, and gnashing his teeth with a noise like unto thunderclaps in midsummer, he put the army to flight. It ran a distance of 18 miles, and Judah could enjoy a respite that night. But the army reappeared on the morrow, ready for battle again, to take revenge on Jacob and his children. They blew their trumpets, whereupon Jacob spake to his sons, Go forth and fight with your enemies. Issachar and Gad said that this day they would take the combat upon themselves, and their father bade them to do it while their brothers kept guard and held themselves in readiness to aid and relieve the two combatants when they showed signs of weariness and exhaustion. The leaders of the day slew 48,000 warriors, and put to flight 12 myriads more, who concealed themselves in a cave. Issachar and Gad fetched trees from the woods, piled the trunks up in front of the opening of the cave, and set fire to them. When the fire blazed with a fierce flame, the warriors spoke, saying, Why should we stay in this cave and perish with the smoke and the heat? Rather will we go forth and fight with our enemies, then we might have a chance of saving ourselves. They left the cave, going through openings at the side, and they attacked Issachar and Gad in front and behind. Dan and Naphtali saw the plight of their brothers and ran to their assistance. They laid about with their swords, hewing a way for themselves to Issachar and Gad, and united with them, they too opposed the foe. It was the third day of the conflict, and the Ninevites were reinforced by an army as numerous as the sand on the seashore. All the sons of Jacob united to oppose it, and they routed the host. But when they pursued after the enemy, the fugitives faced about and resumed the battle, saying, Why should we run away? Let us rather fight them. Perhaps we may be victorious, now they are weary. A stubborn combat ensued, and when Jacob saw the vehement attack upon his children, he himself sprang into the thick of the battle and dealt blows right and left. Nevertheless the heathen were victorious, and succeeded in separating Judah from his brethren. As soon as Jacob was aware of the peril of his son, he whistled, and Judah responded, and his brethren hastened to his aid. Judah was fatigued and parched with thirst, and there was no water for him to drink, but he dug his finger into the ground with such force that water gushed out in the sight of the whole army. Then said one warrior to another, I will flee before these devils, for God fights on their side. And he and all the army fled precipitately, pursued by the sons of Jacob. Soldiers without number they slew, and then they went back to their tents. On their return they noticed that Joseph was missing, and they feared he had been killed or taken captive. Naphtali ran after the retreating army, to make search for Joseph, and he found him still fighting against the Ninevite army. He joined Joseph, and killed countless soldiers, and of the fugitives many drowned, and the men that were besetting Joseph ran off and left him in safety. At the end of the war Jacob continued his journey, unhindered, to his father Isaac. The Legends of the Jews, Volume 1, by Rabbi Louis Ginzberg. The War with the Amorites. At first the people that lived around Shechem made no attempt to molest Jacob, who had returned thither after a while, together with his household, to take up his abode there and establish himself. But at the end of 7 years the heathen began to harass him. The kings of the Amorites assembled together against the sons of Jacob to slay them in the valley of Shechem. Is it not enough, they said, that they have slain all the men of Shechem? Should they be permitted now to take possession of their land too? And they advanced to render battle. Judah leapt into the midst of the ranks of the foot soldiers of the allied kings, and slew first of all Jashub, the king of Tappuah, who was clad in iron and brass from top to toe. The king was mounted, and from his horse he cast his spears downward with both hands, in front of him and in back, without ever missing his aim, for he was a mighty warrior, and he could throw javelins with one hand or the other. Nevertheless Judah feared neither him nor his prowess. He ran toward him, snatching a stone of 60 selaim from the ground and hurling it at him. Jashub was at a distance of 177 ells and 1/3 of an ell, and protected with iron armor and throwing spears, he moved forward upon Judah. But Judah struck him on his shield with the stone and unhorsed him. When the king attempted to rise, Judah hastened to his side to slay him before he could get on his feet. But Jashub was nimble, he stood ready to attack Judah, shield to shield, and he drew his sword to cut off Judah's head. Quickly Judah raised his shield to catch the blow upon it, but it broke in pieces. What did Judah now? He wrested the shield of his opponent away from him, and swung his sword against Jashub's feet, cutting them off above the ankles. The king fell prostrate, his sword slipped from his grasp, and Judah hastened to him and severed his head from his body. While Judah was removing the armor of his slain adversary, 9 of Jashub's followers appeared. Judah slung a stone against the head of the first of them that approached him, with such force that he dropped his shield, which Judah snatched from the ground and used to defend himself against his 8 assailants. His brother Levi came and stood next to him, and shot off an arrow that killed Elon, king of Gaash, and then Judah killed the 8 men. And his father Jacob came and killed Zerori, king of Shiloh. None of the heathen could prevail against these sons of Jacob. They had not the courage to stand up before them, but took to flight, and the sons of Jacob pursued after them, and each slew 1,000 men of the Amorites on that day, before the going down of the sun. And the other sons of Jacob set forth from the hill of Shechem, where they had taken up their stand, and they also pursued after them as far as Hazor. Before this city they had another severe encounter with the enemy, more severe than that in the valley of Shechem. Jacob let his arrows fly, and slew Pirathon, king of Hazor, and then Pasusi, king of Sartan, Laban, king of Aram, and Shebir, king of Mahanaim. Judah was the first to mount the walls of Hazor. As he approached the top, 4 warriors attacked him, but he slew them without stopping in his ascent, and before his brother Naphtali could bring him succor. Naphtali followed him, and the 2 stood upon the wall, Judah to the right and Naphtali to the left, and thence they dealt out death to the warriors. The other sons of Jacob followed their 2 brothers in turn, and made an end of exterminating the heathen host on that day. They subjugated Hazor, slew the warriors thereof, let no man escape with his life, and despoiled the city of all therein. On the following day they went to Sartan, and again a bloody battle took place. Sartan was situated upon high land, and the hill before the city was likewise very high, so that none could come near unto it, and also none could come near unto the citadel, because the wall thereof was high. Nevertheless they made themselves masters of the city. They scaled the walls of the citadel, Judah on the east side being the first to ascend, then Gad on the west side, Simon and Levi on the north, and Reuben and Dan on the south, and Naphtali and Issachar set fire to the hinges upon which the gates of the city were hung. In the same way the sons of Jacob subdued 5 other cities, Tappuah, Arbel, Shiloh, Mahanaim, and Gaash, making an end of all of them in 5 days. On the 6th day all the Amorites assembled, and they came to Jacob and his sons unarmed, bowed down before them, and sued for peace. And the sons of Jacob made peace with all the heathen, who ceded Timnah to them, and all the land of Harariah. In that day also Jacob concluded peace with them, and they made restitution to the sons of Jacob for all the cattle they had taken, 2 head for 1, and they restored all the spoil they had carried off. And Jacob turned to go to Timnah, and Judah went to Arbel, and thenceforth the Amorites troubled them no more. The Legends of the Jews, Volume 1, by Rabbi Louis Ginzberg. Isaac blesses Levi and Judah. If a man voweth a vow, and he does not fulfill it in good time, he will stumble through 3 grave sins: idolatry, unchastity, and bloodshed. Jacob had been guilty of not accomplishing promptly the vow he had taken upon himself at Bethel, and therefore punishment overtook him. His daughter was dishonored, his sons slew men, and they kept the idols found among the spoils of Shechem. Therefore, when Jacob prostrated himself before God after the bloody outrage at Shechem, he bade him arise, and go to Bethel and accomplish the vow he had vowed there. Before Jacob set out for the holy place to do the bidding of God, he took the idols which were in the possession of his sons, and the teraphim which Rachel had stolen from her father, and he shivered them in pieces, and buried the bits under an oak upon Mount Gerizim, uprooting the tree with one hand, concealing the remains of the idols in the hollow left in the earth, and planting the oak again with one hand. Among the destroyed idols was one in the form of a dove, and this the Samaritans dug up later and worshipped. On reaching Bethel he erected an altar to the Lord, and on a pillar he set up the stone whereon he had rested his head during the night he had passed there on his journey to Haran. Then he bade his parents come to Bethel and take part in his sacrifice. But Isaac sent him a message, saying, O my son Jacob, that I might see thee before I die. Whereupon Jacob hastened to his parents, taking Levi and Judah with him. When his grandchildren stepped before Isaac, the darkness that shrouded his eyes dropped away, and he said, My son, are these thy children? For they resemble thee. And the spirit of prophecy entered his mouth, and he grasped Levi with his right hand, and Judah with his left, in order to bless them. And he spoke these words to Levi, May the Lord bring thee and thy seed nigh unto him before all flesh, that ye serve in his sanctuary like the angel of the face and the holy angels. Princes, judges, and rulers shall they be unto all the seed of the children of Jacob. The word of God they will proclaim in righteousness, and all his judgments they will execute in justice, and they will make manifest his ways unto the children of Jacob, and unto Israel his paths. And unto Judah he spake, saying, Be ye princes, thou and one of thy sons, over the sons of Jacob. In thee shall be the help of Jacob, and the salvation of Israel shall be found in thee. And when thou sittest upon the throne of the glory of thy justice, perfect peace shall reign over all the seed of the children of my beloved Abraham. On the morrow Isaac told his son that he would not accompany him to Bethel on account of his great age, but he bade him not delay longer to fulfill his vow, and gave him permission to take his mother Rebekah with him to the holy place. And Rebekah and her nurse Deborah went to Bethel with Jacob. End of chapter 6, part 13.